All right, well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the DSM Forward Ask the Expert series. The series is presented by the Greater Des Moines Partnership and is part of our DSM Forward initiative. Our goal is to help business leaders connect, share, and exchange information and resources related to moving forward in this next phase of reopening. The partnership has published playbooks and for industry and businesses, FAQs, and other resources available to you. And you can find that at the website listed at the bottom of the slide, dsmpartnership.com/dsmforward. We hope the information there in this session is of great help to all of you. So today, I'm joined by three experts, starting with Meg Anderson, the CISO Principal Financial Group, Ben Blakely, Director of Information Security at Dwolla, and Jodi Sully, Vice President, Senior Financial Intelligence Manager at Bankers Trust. So welcome to all of you. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And since I remember how to do that, here we go. All right, so I'd kind of like to just kick this off. For the people that are on the call, if you would, go ahead and open your chat window. We're going to ask you to keep your microphones muted, and just, if you can, just use the chat window. As you have questions, feel free to type them in. This is a very open discussion. I am going to ask each of our participants to kind of give us some opening thoughts about what they're seeing, what they're recommending as it relates to cybersecurity, where we are today. So Ben, why don't we just start with you on a random basis if we can, and we'll go from there.
You bet. Thanks, Mike. So good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Blakely. I'm, as Mike said, the Director of Information Security at Dwolla. And at Dwolla, given that we're a smaller company, IT and InfoSec are the same team. It's not that one reports to the other or vice versa. It is the same team. So we serve both those functions. And so, you know, this is a great opportunity to hear from two other experts in the field for me as well. And I'm happy to take all of your questions today. I think, you know, some of the themes we're seeing is the focus on the endpoint and not relying on network visibility and things like that. But overall, I think, as we'll talk about, we've been pretty happy with our ability to flex and shift so far. So looking forward to your questions.
All right. Meg, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Meg Anderson, and I am the Chief Information Security Officer at Principal, located here in Des Moines, Iowa, and have been with the company for 33 years. So throughout that long tenure, seen a lot of change at the company, but certainly our current times, nobody could have predicted that we would have like 95% of the company globally working remotely through this crisis. And so this has been unprecedented. Even for our information security program is quite large compared to Dwolla's, and we are separate from the information technology team. We have over 100 information security experts on the team, and many located around the world as well. So we pretty much had a mature operating model for work from home in the past. We certainly didn't plan for that to be quite as large a number of people as it turned out to be, but we're able to pivot pretty quickly globally to get people home and working securely. So feel pretty good about where we're at, and just glad to be here today. And one of the things that you mentioned, Mike, was you know, how do we feel about where we're at? And I think one of the reasons that I feel pretty good about where we're at is we're able to benchmark with our peers through some of the industry organizations that we belong to, as well as in panels like this to hear what's going on at other companies in the local area as well. So this is very beneficial for me as well. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Meg. Jodi, how about you?
Good morning. First, I want to apologize in advance if my Labradoodle decides to join in on the conversation as well. I've tried to keep him at bay, but you just never know. My name is Jodi Sully. I'm with Bankers Trust. I manage our financial intelligence department. We have information security, which falls under the financial intelligence department, but we also have a separate IT security team that is under our IT department. In my area, and in addition to information security, we report up through the risk area. So we have enterprise risk, and then we also investigate all of the financial crimes in the bank. And so I'm hoping to share just a little bit about what we're seeing in the cyberspace and the different financial crimes, particularly the increase in some of the crimes we've seen over the last several weeks impacting the local businesses here in the metro.
Well, thank you all three for your introductions. I would say that, Jodi, you've raised probably the very first question that I really wanted to ask, which is, has there been an increase in cyber-related financial crime in Iowa, in central Iowa? And, you know, what does that look like? Especially when you think about these, I think about the small business that is literally a restaurant. It is, you know, I'm a chef, I'm not an IT expert. I run a hardware store. I, you know, do a services business. What are you seeing, and what recommendations do you have?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And, you know, I think right now, if anybody else is experiencing what I'm experiencing, we're really busy right now. People are busy. There's a lot of things coming to us from different directions. And one of the things we've seen at Bankers Trust, and I feel like if we've seen it, then other financial institutions are seeing it, is a real increase in business email compromise. Certainly not a new crime. We've seen it for years and years, but the criminals take advantage of these times when we're busy and we're you know, trying to manage other things and our attention is elsewhere. And so these emails will come in. They'll look like they're from the company's CEO and they're, or some other individual with money movement authority. And the emails have been spoofed. They look really real. They look like they're coming from this individual and they're asked to move money. And I often joke, not joke, I often talk about how the money is requested through an ACH or a wire transfer. And I tell people, you know, we know that an ACH transaction and a wire transfer, the great thing about those is that the money moves really quick and it's available immediately on the other side. The bad thing about it is the money moves really quick and it's available immediately on the other side. So once those funds are gone, it can be really difficult to retrieve that money and get it back on behalf of the customer. So that would be the number one thing that we're seeing, is a real increase in business email compromise. They're targeting small to mid-sized businesses. Those emails come in, individuals from the businesses, you know, send those wires or ACH originations out, and then realize a day or two later that it wasn't authorized, it was fraudulent, and contact the bank to try to retrieve the funds back. What I will say is it's really important for businesses to have a strong relationship with their financial institution, to have a strong relationship and know who those contacts are within their financial institution. There are people just like me and my team that sit within the financial institution that work these kind of cases. FBI has a rapid response system where they go right in and try to work to get this money back immediately. So having somebody within the financial institution that knows how to trigger that with the FBI so that money can be pulled back. But more importantly, I think when you get an email and it's requesting a money be moved, or there's an invoice attached to it, to really look at that invoice, because these criminals will even get in for an expected invoice and change the payment information within an invoice you're expecting. So anything that looks out of the ordinary, pick up the phone and call the other end and make sure that it's legitimate before the money goes out. Because once it's gone, it's really difficult. And in a situation where many businesses are trying to sustain right now, a loss of $100 or $200 or $500,000 could be the end of the business.
So Meg, I'm curious, when you get into this, people trying to take over accounts, I think about my account at Principal, and it's, you know, my retirement's sitting at Principal right now, a lot of it.
Yep.
What can you talk about what Principal's doing, and but I think more importantly, what can that small business person or the individual do
Yeah.
when it comes to protecting the accounts they have?
Yeah, so as a Fortune 500 financial services company, we're not a bank, so it's not quite as easy to request money across all of our businesses as it would be for the banks. Lots of the peers we work with in the Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center, called the FSISAC, are banks, both regional banks, community banks, and the big banks as well. So we learn a lot from them. We do, like you mentioned, Mike, we have 401k accounts, and so based on the criteria, it is possible to withdraw money from a 401k account. So that is one of the main areas where we focus on with regard to ensuring that money is protected. Our call center personnel know how money can be requested, how balanced information can be shared, how to authenticate the user is who they say they are. We're very familiar with business email compromise and account takeover as well, in terms of the tactics and techniques that the cyber criminals are using. And we recently joined a company called the Readiness Institute. It's actually a nonprofit organization, because we know that our customers, including in the small to medium-sized businesses, really need help to really understand what can they do. That restaurant owner, that barber shop, they're not the IT person. Well, they will be. They are the IT person. They're the security person. They're sort of all they have. And what the Cyber Readiness Institute does is it offers tips to those small businesses so that they can be cyber aware and help their employees be cyber aware. Because we know phishing is really a huge attack vector, it helps them understand, how does that happen? How should I be educating my users? What process should we put in place so that even if I do get that email requesting somebody buy gift cards or somebody transfer money, what second factor should I call the user? How do I make sure that this is a legit request type of thing? And the Cyber Readiness Institute helps those small businesses with things like password complexity, making sure you're applying patches, making sure your devices are appropriately secure, and it gives them the tools and the resources to do that for free. So that's a really big benefit for small to medium-sized businesses who are pretty much at a loss. The cyber thing it's very elusive for people to understand. Why does this happen? And especially here in central Iowa, we have this Iowa nice, right? We expect people to do the right thing. We expect people to be asking legitimate questions and not trying to be a criminal, correct? And so the Cyber Readiness Institute has been something that we think, being a member and supporting it along with some other companies like Microsoft, General Motors, MasterCard, and ExxonMobil, that we are doing something for our customers and for the community by spreading the message there for the small to medium-sized customers.
Yes, I might ask you, Meg, just to drop me an email with that link, or put it in our chat window here for everybody if you would. And we'll make sure when we publish this that we put that link out there, because that sounds like the kind of resource I need to be pointing some of my clients to as well. Ben, from the Dwala perspective, what are you seeing from new attacks, different kinds of attacks? Because you serve a lot of kinds of businesses. I work with a couple businesses that use your back end to move money. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you're seeing there as far as the attack vectors. And
Sure. Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike. The interesting thing about us is that we do have this really diverse set of clients. Not all of them are small, but a lot of them are small businesses that, to Jodi's point, may just not be able to absorb a loss of any meaningful size, especially right now, or it may be more painful for them. And I think I'm also very interested, Meg, in the Cyber Readiness Institute, because that's the type of, I don't want to say counseling, that's the kind of conversations we have with a lot of our clients as we're onboarding them and supporting them, is helping them understand those considerations. Some of them are very technical and they totally get it. They're totally fine. Others, need that help. But I think In general, so at Dwolla, our financial intelligence unit is separate from InfoSec team. So I can't speak directly to that, and you know, almost defer to Jodi's comments on that, 'cause I think that was really useful information. But on the information security side, you know, I think we know that things like business email compromise, as you've heard spoken about, and you can see in things like the FBI's IC3 report, you know, that is one of the biggest risks we need to worry about, whether that's phishing directly or whether it's other vectors there. But more generally, you know, account takeover and account compromise is increasingly one of those top risks as well. And the 2020 DBIR, the Verizon data breach incident report that came out a few weeks ago, showed that trend pretty clearly. And that report, I would say, is probably the most comprehensive and exhaustive analysis of data that we have. It may not be you know, perfect, but it's as good as we have. So one of the things that we really encourage our clients to do, and something that we've adopted, is everywhere that we can, is multi-factor authentication. And you heard Meg mention that specifically in the context of financial transactions. But you know, I would go so far as to say, if you have a web application, an IT system that isn't using multi-factor authentication, and it has an internet-facing presence in June 2020, you're falling behind. I think the complexities of having passwords that are complex, that are strong enough to be safe and also user friendly. And yes, password managers can help, but that's a struggle, and it's ultimately a losing battle. So that's something that we push very heavily with our clients, and we're actually going to be, in the next few weeks here, rolling out a universal multi-factor authentication for our own dashboard as well for our clients. It's been optional for a long time, and we've decided optional isn't good enough anymore. So if that's something that your company hasn't looked into, whether that's working with your like SaaS application partners or vendors to incorporate it or enable it, or in your own applications to implement that, I'd strongly recommend that.
Okay, great. I guess the next question I'd kind of like to throw out there, a whole bunch of us are working at home right now, and whether you're, I don't know, Dwolla, you're probably around 50, 60, 70 people, and Bankers Trust, I know you have hundreds, and Meg, I don't know how many thousands you've got around the earth. What, from a security standpoint, what challenges did you face initially, are you still facing, and what advice do you have for, you know, we at the partnership really, we're not a technology company, it's not what we do. What should we be doing? What should the business with 10 people at home be doing right now? I don't know who wants to start. Maybe Meg, you can start.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. Well, as a financial services company like Bankers Trust and Dwolla, we all have a lot of customer data, and we've made commitments to our customers to protect that data appropriately, make sure it's not breached, whether that's accidental or malicious. And our work from home technology that we've used for years has been secure. Multi-factor was mentioned by Ben. And we make sure employees can't cut, copy, paste information in the systems that they're using. We've also addressed printing from home, as that has not been allowed in our arrangements except by policy exception. And so we want to make sure that if employees are working from home, they're not printing a bunch of customer data, throwing out in their trash, that sort of thing. So we've had to address some of that in terms of reminding people of how to make sure that we honor the commitments to our customers and keep everything they're providing to us secure. And then we've also provided tips, and these have been, you know, in other places as well around the internet, making sure that your routers have complex passwords and strong passwords, and making sure that the systems you're using, if you're using a personal device, are up to date. Otherwise, you know, I think it's gone pretty smoothly in terms of the number of people. We have generally kept track of the number of people using our virtual private network, our VPN, during snowstorms at Principal. And while we have roughly 18,000 people around the globe, there's a large number of them that are still here in central Iowa. And so the number of people that were on VPN, you know, in the largest snowstorm was somewhere in the 6,000 to 7,000 range or something like that. Now we've got many more that are working from home, whether it's on VPN or using our virtual desktop infrastructure technology. So it's been really interesting to watch us be able to do that so quickly. It really has gone pretty smoothly.
That's good to hear. Jodi, what did you face with the bank?
You know, I would just echo a lot of what Meg said. She said it so well. Um, the printing was another thing that we addressed as well, because that was something that, you know, employees wanted to be able to do, and we, you know, immediately told them no, that wasn't going to be allowable from home. We set up actual hubs that, you know, if somebody wanted to print something, then they could go to one of our branch hubs, print it, and use it there, so that it continued to stay secure. That's always a challenge. I was really impressed as well with Bankers Trust. We had, you know, some people that worked remotely. We really weren't largely remote. We have our VPN, and certainly had people that did have remote capabilities, but we stood it up, and I think had 95% of our people working remote within 5 days. So again, did a great job, and faced some of the similar challenges I think that probably Principal did, but on a much smaller scale. So, but it's all gone very, very smoothly. I've just been really pleased.
Ben, maybe you could just, for those who don't know what a VPN is, and perhaps
Sure.
don't know, you know, because there's a lot of people who don't know what a VPN is, and I don't blame them. We all get run over by acronyms. Maybe a little bit about VPNs and what's a simple path for someone. If I've got 8 employees working from their homes and I'd like to secure them on a VPN, one, why am I doing that? What does it buy me? And then 2 is, you know, can I, you know, go to VPN.com, or what do I do?
Yeah, great question, Mike. So a virtual private network, a VPN, is basically, you think of that as kind of a tunnel between you, wherever you are, and some trusted endpoint on the other end, right? So in kind of a typical setup, that trusted endpoint would probably be your corporate network, or it could be maybe your Amazon AWS account, or some other point that you kind of have visibility and control over. To Mike's point, there are a number of free VPN services you can stand up. Those have the advantage of making sure that your traffic is protected, you know, on the wire between you and there. But what they lack is your ability to have any visibility into what that traffic is. And you also have to be very careful, because there are a number of those services that may be free or very inexpensive. And the reason they're free and expensive because they're using you and your information as a product on the other end. So you have to be really careful of that. So the other thing that's worth mentioning is, you know, HTTPS, right? So encrypted web traffic. It's like when you go to Amazon.com, it's HTTPS, Amazon.com. In some sense, that is an encrypted tunnel as well. The challenges are, you know, a VPN has additional strengths because there's some additional confidence that the other end of the connection is who you think it is, right? But what we've seen kind of in an industry sense is a shift over the last, I'm going to say 5 to maybe even 10 years, as it started kind of gradually, to this thinking of kind of a VPN-less, or you'll hear it called beyond trust concept, where if I'm using reliable applications like gmail.com and Salesforce, and, you know, applications that have invested a lot in their security, and the way they've configured their web applications is secure, well, then you have to ask the question of whether that VPN is still necessary and important. And there are a lot of variables there. And I'm not going to say that a VPN is not necessary there, but it's worth mentioning that is a consideration. And it depends on the applications you're using. One thing that we have been looking at Dwolla is we do use a VPN. We have a number of our services that are behind it, and that actually is housed in our Des Moines office. And it's been fine. So we're a little bit under 100 employees, so we're nowhere near the scale of Jodi or Meg. But, you know, accordingly, our infrastructure is scaled that way as well. So I will say I sweated a little bit with the thought of, for example, an all-company meeting with everyone dialed in for the VPN, right? So it was a consideration. And so we've definitely been looking at kind of a combination of factors being, you know, what doesn't need to be on the VPN? You know, what applications can we get comfortable enough with their security to not require the VPN, right? Which is a complex consideration. And then beyond that, if we do need to keep the VPN around for some of these applications, as I think we will, does that need to live in, you know, a Dwolla building, or can we use something like AWS or some other cloud service to terminate that and push a lot of the responsibility for those things that nobody really has time to deal with, like power, cooling, electricity, upgrading firmware, push that off to somebody else if we can. Because for us, you know, we can do that stuff, but we don't necessarily think that's the best use of our time in all cases.
Sure. So let's say I am that business that thinks a VPN is a good idea. Can you give me a couple reputable vendors? I mean, I get that there's free out there, and I'm a believer you get what you pay for. But if you are this 10, 20 user business, what are a couple reputable VPNs that are worth looking at that don't require me to just install my own stuff and deal with it?
That's a good question. And honestly, Mike, because I typically am using our corporate one, I haven't looked at any of them recently, so I can't really vouch for any of them. My general guidance would be, pay attention. If you're looking at these, pay attention, if they have privacy policies, are they based in the United States or elsewhere? I mean, look at this as a risk assessment exercise before you start to use it. Nobody's perfect, but make sure you're going into it with both eyes open.
Jodi or Meg, do you have any off the top of your head that you know that are good small business oriented ones? Sorry to catch you cold with that question, but
I don't, but I do hear some of the employees on my team who use them either in their personal life or beyond. So I'm happy to get back to you if you have the ability to share back. If
we
Jodi
do.
doesn't have any.
Yeah.
I do not, outside my wheelhouse, so I'll leave that to Meg.
Yeah, well, if any or all of you can drop me a note, when we publish the video, we'll put a blog post up and we'll include, along with the link you gave us for the Cyber Readiness Institute, we'll include some of those, just kind of a list of options. There's so many articles when you go out there and say best VPN, and you don't even know if those articles are credible because sometimes they're the bait, if you will. I'm curious what surprised you all the most going into this time where we all went remote. What was the one, I mean, because I don't know of anybody that had a strategic plan or a disaster recovery plan for the pandemic. I guess there was a grocery chain down in Texas that did, but other than that, what surprised you?
Sure. So I think I was pleasantly, I mean, there were a lot of challenges, but I was pleasantly surprised by how quickly we were able to adjust. And I think that's largely a credit to the dedication of our staff. But we were already fairly cloud-based. I mean, mostly cloud-based beforehand, and there were some and continue to be some friction points. But I think the fact that we were able to, with a lot of support from our HR team, our legal team, additionally, essentially overnight, move 100 people to working fully remote. I mean, I was just amazed at how smoothly it went, all things considered. Right? Again, not to downplay the challenges, but
fair enough. Good surprises are better than bad surprises. Jodi?
I would echo that as well. I was pleasantly surprised at how smoothly it all went. And then I also saw a meme that said, I guess we're about to see how many meetings could actually be an email. And I am surprised at how many meetings are now an email. I guess that there are lots of emails now instead of actual meetings. So.
And that's a nice development.
Yeah. So we actually did have a pandemic plan at Principal. No surprise that it didn't include everything that we've done here. It did have something about making sure your employees got vaccinated. So that provided a little bit of, sadly, a chuckle related to our ability to get that done, of course. But we did work together on a crisis management team prior to the pandemic, started in February. And so there was a little bit of, we see this coming. And of course, we have an office in Hong Kong, and they were hit earlier than we were. So we were able to learn from some of our global operations as well. And probably the one thing that surprised me the most was the feeling of isolation and the camaraderie that you miss, even in the video conference arena. You get to see people's faces, but you don't really get to connect the way that you're used to connecting with your team. And the work that got done when you just walked through the aisle, walked through a building and said, oh, so-and-so, can you check in this? Or I know you're an expert on this, I have a quick question, or just asking about their family. So it really surprised me about how intentional we need to be about keeping those relationships moving ahead and being able to connect in different ways. So we're finding ways to do that. I'm sure that the ways that we're finding aren't connecting with all, 150 or so information security professionals around the globe, but hopefully we can keep them engaged and connected to their peers. We have our internship program this summer as well. And so I was really happy that the decision was made to continue that. We have 97 interns at Principal. And so they were really excited that it's all remote. And so that's been a surprise, as well as being able to provide that opportunity to those students and keep that moving. That's been fun.
Yeah, but that's interesting because you have to onboard them and everything completely remote. So I guess the next question I have is where have been the challenges? What have you run into that has been, boy, this has been hard. These are the ones that were, I think about a bank where you're still counting cash. You're, not just from a pure security standpoint, but I can't imagine the number of people trying to figure out how to get to the cash right now. How do you deal with, what are you dealing with that's new and special, I guess, or I'm winding two questions together, my apologies. What has been the challenge for you? Let's start with Jodi.
I think the number one challenge, one of the things we did, and we have a pandemic plan as well. It clearly needs updating. I had said at one point about COVID, I said, this is the best tabletop exercise ever, because just when you think you're going in one direction, something changes. One of the one thing I've said throughout this whole thing is you're trying to put metrics and make decisions and risk, but you're dealing with human beings. And so anytime you're trying to make decisions and measure risk and make decisions like that, but you're dealing with human beings and human lives, is really challenging, because you've got a wide spectrum of employees that some are ready to get back at it and they're living life as normal as they can and they're out there, and you've got others that are still really scared and have a lot of anxiety. And so trying to manage that and do the right thing for everybody, I think, is probably the most challenging, and really trying to be sensitive and understand that everybody is at a different place in all of this. Our branches remained open. So while, a lot of our staff was working remotely that could work remotely, the branches remained open. And so those frontline staff, they're essential employees. Banks can't close. People have to get to their money. Loans still need to be made. PPP was huge for Bankers Trust. So it was all hands on deck. We had people from all over the bank working on PPP. I was working on PPP, everybody was. So making sure your branch employees, those folks that are in the branches day in and day out, continue to feel safe in their working environment. So that's probably the biggest challenge, is you're working with human beings and really being empathetic to that and realizing that.
Meg, what about you? My apologies to all of you that had your pandemic plans. I made a bad assumption on that one, so I apologize to you both. But what's been challenging for Principal that you can chat about?
The whole situation has been just a big challenge that's, got a lot of surprises in how well it's gone. I think, I don't want to speak for our lead of crisis management, but I do think that the challenge is yet to come in moving us back into our physical office buildings and figuring out what that sort of next normal looks like. I think that might actually be more challenging than, it's sort of like a flood is really easy. You react to that flood and you get out of the way. It's moving back and sort of picking up the pieces and figuring out what is sustainable, what needs to change, and how things look different. Because I think that many people are waiting to get back to normal, and that normal has shifted quite a bit. I joke that I never ever want to go into a restaurant again to pick up my carryout. I want it curbside always, right? I want them to tell me, you know, call this number when you arrive. I want to be able to pay over the phone. So there's some experiences I think that we've all been thrown into, and some of it's actually good. So I think some of that challenge is what are those business processes that have changed, and which of those do we need to sustain, and what does that mean to us?
Yeah, which adds a whole nother layer of security when you're talking about, okay, we've made this change because we had to. Now the customers love it. My brother owns a car dealership, and the service department started picking up and dropping off cars for service. And the service manager said, we're going to be doing this permanently because they'll kill us if we don't keep that
Yeah,
service available going forward. And then
exactly.
there was the whole issue with handling customers' cars, handling their keys, that's a whole new security, physical security, but security issue. Ben, what about you for Dwolla? What really, to the same point as the others?
Yeah, I'll definitely echo everything Jodi and Meg said, and just kind of build on something Jodi said. I mean, I think if we look at this from a kind of a utilitarian security perspective, when people are stressed and anxious, they're also vulnerable, and I think that's something we have to keep in mind from a security perspective. We have to be even more proactive about supporting our employees, getting them information, and helping protect them from these threats. Because I mean, let's be real. Their 9 to 5 is probably not their number one concern this week, this year, right? And so that's something we have to keep in mind. I think, largely Dwolla, we're fairly, I don't want to say fortunate, but we don't have as many challenges as a lot of my peers do. I think about my peers, not only in the financial industry, like Jodi, but in critical infrastructure, like power, telecom, water. I mean, all these industries where somebody's got to be at the plant, right? And, I can only imagine the challenges that they're dealing with. So I'm fortunate to not have that scale. I will say an interesting challenge in just having everyone remote is that, and not not to pick on anyone, but we really only have one major ISP in the central Iowa area, right? And so if there are any issues with that ISP, that becomes an issue. So it was kind of a conversation of, is that company now indirectly kind of a critical vendor for us because we rely on them for a lot of productivity. So that was kind of an interesting challenge. I'd say, I mean, and I know Jodi and Meg probably had this on a much larger scale, but onboarding and offboarding employees has been pretty challenging. We can't just have Apple ship someone a computer and have them off and running. There are things we have to do to that computer, at least in our current model. And likewise, when someone leaves the company, we need to get things back in a certain period of time. So that has been a challenge, and balancing, we don't want to put people in a position where they feel uncomfortable by asking them to go into the office if they don't want to, but we also have certain obligations we have to meet, on both ends of that. As well as the support in between. So that has been a bit of a kind of I guess, surprise.
I'll remind the people out there listening to this conversation, if you have questions, and thank you for the comments so far I've seen come through, but if you have questions, please type them in. We'd love to include you in the discussion. So what have you learned and will do differently should we unfortunately have to go through another pandemic? What's going to be different? Meg, you want to start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we've learned that we're resilient, and I think one of the things we also learned, we were using a certain video conferencing technology at Principal, and we were in the transition to a different video conference technology, neither of which were Zoom, by the way. And we were pretty incremental in our rollout of most technologies so that employees could adapt and we could work out bugs and that sort of thing, instead of sort of have a big bang and one day you were using this way and then Monday morning you have to learn this one, and it impacts how we interact both in individual one-on-one meetings as well as in conference rooms and for large-scale department meetings. So there was a reason for our incremental approach. But what we learned when we worked from home is one of those technologies worked far better and took less resources from a VPN point of view than the other. And the video experience worked far better. And so now people shifted quite quickly. And so I think that has allowed us to think about, how does that impact how we roll out technology in the future? Are people really able to adapt quicker than we are giving them credit for? Are they more resilient? Did we provide better instructions and information about the technology because we knew everybody was remote and they couldn't attend a training class as easily or stop by a service desk type of thing? So I think that's something that I think we'll think through a little bit differently in the future.
Ben, what about you?
Yeah, good points. So I've been in IT about 20 years now, and I think pandemic planning is not for all companies, and I definitely applaud principle for the preparedness, but I think it stands the risk of being kind of a checkbox, right? And when I think about companies that I've either worked for or am familiar with, it was one of the more common scenarios in pandemics. Like tabletop exercise was kind of like the zombie apocalypse scenario, right? I mean, I don't think that people always took it very seriously. I think the closest thing in my experience what we're dealing with now was H1N1 a few years ago, when we had to take it more seriously, but thankfully didn't get to this point. So I think the takeaway is, this is a tier 1 thing that needs to be planned for. But I think along with that is the fact that, to Meg's point, I mean, normality has shifted. So, we need to be prepared for this to happen in the future. I think that unfortunately this will just be a fact of life, but I think part of that preparedness will be the shifts in the way that we just do things on a day-to-day basis, so that it hopefully becomes a little bit easier to be ready for that to happen.
Yeah. Jodi, do you think there's something particular that's going to be done differently if we have to go through this again?
I think we've learned a great deal. Like I said, our pandemic plan, we have one, and it was very, it certainly wasn't comprehensive enough to manage a pandemic. And I think I go back to what Ben said, I think there was, and I can't quote it exactly, but I think people thought, well, this will never really happen. I mean, you kind of get into that, well, this won't really happen. And so I think that's why when you're planning for a pandemic, you just can't even fathom all of the things that go with it. Now that we've been through it, we've learned so much that we can put into that pandemic plan. I hope I don't have to do this ever again. That but for the next group that does, at least they've got more comprehensive information to go by, and they can learn from the things that we did right and things that maybe we didn't do right. But I'm really proud of the way Bankers Trust has rallied and the team has come together, because we've managed so well.
Well, there's no better teacher than experience. I think that's been said many, many times. I think I'll just add one thing. I was very involved in the early stages of the internet, commercial internet, and very involved in the very first stages of Wi-Fi. And so I remember all the fragility of networks back before they got really solid. And I've been stunned by the lack of challenges that the mainstream world is seeing with our internet infrastructure globally. To have thrown this much at it, I don't know that anybody ever really thought that through when they designed those protocols back in the, I'll go all the way back in some cases into the 80s and before, where some of the original protocol work was done. So I've been amazed. Well, we don't have any more questions in the chat room. So I guess here, I'd like to have you each comment one last time before we wrap this up. If there is one or two things that you think those truly smaller businesses need to take away, and we've got some good links here, and I will definitely share out and make that link you provided for the Cyber Readiness Institute. But if there's one or two things you can share that you think, boy, if you're not going to do anything else, please go do these one or two things. And Meg, maybe I can start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think my first one's probably going to be sort of wrapped up into my second one, but I think one of the things that struck me very early on with this pandemic was the thought that it can happen to you. So I was actually in San Francisco in early February, well, late February, I guess it was. And there was some people in the US were starting to think about coronavirus, but it wasn't very large scale. And I returned from there, and I was thinking, this is actually going to happen in the US. I think many of us in the US didn't really think, the cries from Italy and that sort of thing. I think we thought, well, we're better prepared. We can handle this. We'll do it better. And as it turns out, that wasn't the case. And I think that has a lot of parallels to cybersecurity. It can happen to you. You do not want to be on the front page. You do not want to lose your small to medium-sized business because of a cyber criminal. So while hopefully the probability might be lower, it actually does happen. It can happen. And I tell people that a lot is if you see something happening at a financial services company, think about it as an employee of this company if that happened here. And so I think that's a takeaway is don't discount what's going on. Those companies that are getting hacked or breached, they're probably in a similar situation to you. So they just got unlucky, right? And you haven't been unlucky quite yet. And so the second part of that, I would just say making sure your employees are informed, making sure you're informed. And cybersecurity, unfortunately, stuff changes all the time. And so that being informed isn't sort of a once and done. So it's that continuously keeping yourself updated. Find a friend. It's a complicated topic. It's a complicated topic for me. There's a lot of technical jargon on top of the fear-based jargon when it comes to attackers and advanced persistent threats. And it's like, who thinks North Korea might be after you or China? But it does happen. So find that friend or that resource that can help you understand it just a little bit better than you understand it today.
Ben, would you like to go next?
Yeah, and I can't echo what Meg, those points enough. That was fantastic, Meg, and it's along the same lines that I was thinking. I mean, so what I always tell people, and this is more of a general recommendation, but if you try to think about like what are the one or two like buttons I need to push to make me secure, like security, unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way, right? It's all about risk management. And I love what Meg said about, they were just unlucky, because that's something that we incorporate into our security awareness programs. And I talk about all the time. I teach at Iowa State and I talk about it there as well, is that, risk management, it's hard, it's inexact, it's fuzzy, and you can always be wrong, right? There's always the black swan. I mean, look at COVID. So when we see another company get breached, the takeaway from that is not, how could they possibly be so dumb? The takeaway is, what did they miss that we can try to make sure we don't miss? Because it is, in some sense, it's a numbers game. The other takeaway from that is always being prepared to respond. I think traditionally InfoSec, we put a lot of effort into prevention, maybe detection, not as much into response. Recommendations on that vary, but you'll see recommendations up to 50-50 or even skewed the other way, where you should be putting as many resources into preparing to respond to an incident as you are to preventing an incident. And kind of the case study there is Home Depot versus Target, where Target, according to what we know and what's publicly available, unfortunately was not really well prepared for the breach to happen to them. Home Depot, which had a very similar breach, it was actually even the same piece of malware, a variant of the same piece of malware, was prepared, and Target, got quite a bit of damage reputationally and otherwise. Home Depot, they weren't unscathed, but was much less impacted. And that the difference there was how well they were prepared. So I guess those would be my two takeaways. Is one is start with risk, right? You can't cover all of your bases because there's just too many to cover. So think about what the threats are that matter to your business, and B, that assume breach mentality that sooner or later it will happen to you, and you need to get ready to deal with that.
Jodi.
Oh, those were both so good. I hate to have to follow them. I guess a couple of things I would leave folks with. At Bankers Trust, we have our Stop, Look, Think campaign. We've had it since 2012. And basically it just says, stop, look, think. No matter what you're doing, before you click on it, before you respond to it, before you send it, before you, whatever it may be, just stop for a minute, look and think before you do it. And it applies across the board to all of our employees, whether it's, an email or a teller giving $100 out, whatever it is. Just stop for a minute because we're all so busy. The other thing I guess I would leave folks with is know what your financial institution has for anomaly detection in cases of money transfers. You know, there are we have anomaly detection for ACH and suspect ACH and suspect wires and suspect checks and suspect deposits and the whole bit. So know what your financial institution has, and what those notifications are going to look like, and what those phone calls are going to look like if there is something unusual, and how to respond to those, and how important it is to respond quickly so that the fraud people on the other side can take the appropriate actions.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all very much for your time today. This has been a really wonderful session. I've definitely learned a few things as well, and I know there's been a lot of takeaways here, so I truly appreciate it. To our participants, thank you for joining us. Again, I'll point out at the partnership website, there are a lot of resources out there, part of DSM Forward. You can go to dsmpartnership.com/DSM Forward. This video from this event and the links and information will be made available probably yet today to the people who are on the copy list, and we'll publish this as a blog post probably very early next week with all that content as well. So with that, thank you all, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Mike, Meg, Jodi.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you, Ben.
Bye-bye.
Yep, bye-bye.
Okay.